Well, we've got an audience, so let's kick off. Here we go. Well, good afternoon and welcome to the stage, David Heilpern. He needs very little introduction. He has been around for many years. He's currently the Dean of Law at Southern Cross University. His areas of research are victims' rights and drug law reform, Aboriginal overrepresentation in the criminal justice system, and environmental activism. So he's going to talk today about the drug driving laws, and I hope everyone got into town safely without being probed and swabbed and interfered with. And I'll hand the floor to David. Thank you.
Thank you. Thanks so much, everyone, and thank you for coming to MardiGrass 2025. It's wonderful for me sitting here because I can see the hall. The first night I ever spent in Nimbin was in 1976, and I slept under the hall. That was the youth refuge then, and Nimbin's been part of my life ever since then. It's my home. I don't get to live here, but I always feel so at home here, and I know this is where I'll either spend my dotage or just get buried here. I'd be happy with either. I'm here to talk about the such vexed question of drug driving, and you know what's fantastic is that this is on the agenda well and truly at MardiGrass and everywhere else. But in particular, we just had an incredible talk by Dr. Michael White, and I know it was recorded, it'll be online. Have a look at it. He's really up to date on all the good research. My task here is to talk about where are we at with drug driving. Where are we at a little bit past, where are we at now, and what do I see as being the future. But I really want to also give maximum opportunity for questions and ideas and thoughts about drug driving, because, you know, really, the experts have had their say, but there's not a lot of chance for people to get advice and help and thoughts and exchange ideas, so hopefully I'll leave plenty of time for that. Teeny bit of past. The whole reason drug driving, and really I'm focused totally on THC, but the reason I'm focused on THC is because it's the only one of the detectable drugs for drug driving testing that is fat soluble. So it stays in your system for hours, weeks, hours, days, whereas the other drugs don't. And we've got this ridiculous situation now where a young person who wants a big night out on a Friday night, say they're a tradie, and they want to get out of it because they think it might help them have sex or something. So what they do is, what are they going to do? Are they going to smoke cannabis? Are they going to drink? Are they going to use amphetamines? And dollar for dollar, what's cheapest is not alcohol, which will cost them, I'm a bit out of touch, but what, 60, 80, 100 bucks for a big night out? Or they could use ice, which will cost them 10 or 15 bucks. Or they could use cannabis, but if they use cannabis, it's going to be in their system on Monday morning when they go to work. So what we're doing is encouraging really much more dangerous illicit drug use. And the other factor, of course, is that those people who are using cannabis medicinally are being forced away from it because of drug driving laws. And what are they doing instead? They're going back to their opioids. They're going back to their barbiturates. They're going back to their benzodiazepines. Or they're going back to their alcohol, all of which we know causes much greater road safety. So these silly drug laws are increasing danger and risk to our community. And I couldn't stomach it. As a magistrate, taking away people's licences for using their prescription drug or their preferred medicine or even their preferred recreational drug just seems so completely absurd to me. And it also takes away from all the other drug law reform. We could have perfectly legal cannabis in Australia tomorrow. MardiGrass could succeed, and yet if we don't change the drug driving laws, anyone who drives can't use cannabis. And that is a ridiculous situation. And make no mistake, this is a fight back by the authorities who want to see no change. This is a fight back by the alcohol companies who can't stand to think there'll be somebody else competing on their patch. This is a fight back from the police services who make squillions, literally, out of the drug driving laws and of course increase their powers because of drug laws. This is a fight back from the pharmaceutical companies who can't stand the thought of having another drug that doesn't need to be used every single day on their prescriptions as helping people to have a better and healthier life. So this is fight back from the powers that be, and I couldn't stomach it. So that's one of the main reasons I left being off on the bench, and lucky enough, I've got another job that enables me to really speak my mind at last. So, first the bad news, where are we at? New South Wales, 280,000 drug driving random tests this year. Just to give you a comparison, the whole rest of the world random lipstick drug tests, the rest of the world does not equal New South Wales alone. Queensland, 180,000 tests. Victoria, 180,000 tests. I mean, we are addicted to drug driving testing in the most ridiculous way. And for what? Where is the road safety benefit from this? Zero. The only state in Australia that has seen a reduction in the road toll in the last 4 years is Tasmania, where they have a medicinal defence. Now, I'm not saying that those two things are connected. That's as stupid as saying drug driving, people who use cannabis cause car accidents. But the bottom line is that there is absolutely no evidence that random drug testing for THC has reduced road trauma anywhere in Australia or anywhere in the world. And anyone who argues with you about drug driving, the very first question you ask them is this: where is the evidence that this saves lives? I mean, if it did, I wouldn't really have a problem with it. One distinction that's important is no one's arguing that the laws relating to driving under the influence should change. They shouldn't. They should remain in place. We don't want people having 15 bongs, getting in their car and driving. We don't want people drinking and driving, or even using, God forbid, using ecstasy and driving. You know, all of those things are negative, but those laws should remain. This is about detectable levels of THC. That's the background. That's where we're at today. Tens of thousands of people every year in New South Wales, tens of thousands more in all the other states and territories lose their licences. And what's the implication of that? It's really serious for many people, particularly in rural and regional areas, because they can't drive, they can't work, they can't visit their family, they can't do the kinds of things, you know, single mums who need to get their kids to sport or to drama or to their father's place or to medical appointments. None of it possible because they haven't got their licence, because they were using medicinal cannabis to deal with pain, or using it for PTSD, or using it to deal with any of the other conditions for which cannabis has been proven to be so effective. So, where are we up to in terms of change? Let's have a few little good news stories. Firstly, we had a drug summit in New South Wales. I attended the drug summit and spoke on and it managed to address everybody on drug driving. You know, I know it's not the most important thing in the world. You know, my kids say to me, Dad, you know, Gaza, Ukraine, you know, like, yes. And I agree that I'm completely obsessed on it. But in terms of impact on people's lives, it is really serious. And it's such a no-brainer. So I spoke at the drug summit, as did others, in favour of drug driving law reform, getting rid of detectable levels for THC, and having a defence which says this: if you are using cannabis in accordance with your prescription and you are not adversely affected, you're not, you know, weaving all over the road, and so you have a prescription, you're using in accordance with that prescription, and you're not driving under the influence, you should have a defence to the charge. This is not revolutionary. And, you know, Michael Balderstone and I are, of course, lifelong friends and great buddies, and he's at me all the time. Like, what about people who grow their own? What about people who don't choose to use prescriptions? What about people who can't afford prescriptions? And I agree with him totally, but the idea is to get a leg in the door with the medicinal cannabis users. So, I spoke at the drug summit, as did others. I don't want to claim any responsibility, but Here we have John Brogden, ex-leader of the Liberal Party in New South Wales. No way in any stretch of the imagination do we have him as some sort of good drug law reform record. And Carmel Tebbit, who used to be married to Anthony Albanese, but is a politician in her own right in New South Wales, including previously being the Health Minister. They convened the Drug Summit, they wrote the recommendations, and lo and behold, there in the recommendations is a bipartisan, unanimous recommendation to change the drug driving detection laws for medicinal cannabis patients. And not only that, it says police at the roadside should have a discretion to move people on. Now, you know, as a lawyer, the lawyer in me says, well, police always have a discretion. That's how it works. But this is a statutory discretion, so that if people show their little, I imagine a little plastic slip with their doctor's prescription on it, show the police that, then the police just have the power and the encouragement to move, to say, well, you know, go about your day. You're not going to lose your license, you're not going to get arrested, you don't have to come back to the station, you don't have to go to court. Now, that is a pretty hopeful sign. And let's keep in mind that the Drug Summit was under pressure. They were under pressure from police who spoke at it. They were under pressure from pharmaceutical companies that spoke at it. They were under pressure from the AMA, who, you know, I mean, they've opposed legalisation of drugs all the time, so we don't expect too much different. But just prior to the Drug Summit, an organisation that I've been a member of for 45 years, the NRMA, issued the most disgusting, appalling, dishonest report saying that drug driving saves lives and that it should, drug driving testing saves lives and that it should be increased. So despite that pressure, the Drug Summit remained true to its cause, backed itself on the evidence, and has made this recommendation to government. Even more hearteningly, for me at least, is that the Liberal opposition in New South Wales has said nothing against that recommendation. In other words, I think they're just running dead on it. And why wouldn't they? 1 million plus prescriptions now in Australia for cannabis. Everybody knows somebody who, you know, a policeman here I was speaking to today said to me, you know, well, my sister who is getting so much benefit out of it. And I mean, it's permeating our society, the use of prescription cannabis, and about bloody time. So that's one little bit of good news. We'll see where it goes to, but I'm smiling on the inside. The second piece of good news is what's happened in Victoria. I just want to temper this by saying that there is a lot of utter bullshit going on about the changes in Victoria. People are saying, oh, Victoria's legalised drug driving. People are saying, oh, now the magistrates if you've got a prescription, the magistrates will let you off. That is not the case. In Victoria, if you got busted drug detection driving, the magistrates had no discretion except to take your licence away no matter what. That's still the case in Queensland. It's not the case in New South Wales, Tasmania, blah, 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 and it's never been the case in New South Wales. Magistrates have always had the discretion for your first offence of drug driving to let you keep your licence. I should know. I did a shitload of it when I was sitting on the bench. I let people keep their licences as much as I possibly could. All that's happened in Victoria is there has been a catch-up to New South Wales, a catch-up to South Australia, and maybe a little bit further than both of them, and I'll explain why in a second. But that is a really positive thing. It's good that Victoria has done that, but let's not mess about. It's still illegal. It still depends on which magistrate you get. You might get one that was, you know, wears a cardigan the whole time and you're not going to have any luck. Certainly not too many wear caftans. So it's totally discretionary, and magistrates may let you keep your licence in Victoria. The only bit that's better than New South Wales in Victoria is that in New South Wales you can only do it once, that is, let people keep their licence, every 5 years. In Victoria there's no 5-year rule. So conceivably magistrates could keep letting people off with a prescription. My own prediction is they won't. It'll be a once-off. And then what happens? Same as New South Wales. People go back to their prescription drugs or go back to living in pain. By the way, I've yet to see a study. I'd love to see this, but you know, chronic pain is what is the most common use for medicinal cannabis. And I'd really love to see a study of how your driving is affected by driving in chronic pain. You know, I reckon it would be pretty seriously adversely affected. I mean, my driving is affected just by if I've got the shits about something, let alone if I'm driving along with a toothache. You know, or if any of my grandkids are fighting in the back of the car, or if I'm distracted, or if I'm listening to something on the radio about Donald Trump. All of those things certainly would have more impact than me taking my medicine. Okay, so the Victorian amendments are good, but I've heard people saying, quote, that's just in the last couple of weeks. Quote, this is a revolution. They have legalised drug driving. The magistrates must take into account your prescription. It's an orange light. We've won the war. Victoria leads the way. Each of those is bullshit, and I guess that's what happens to some extent. You know, I don't want to bag out any particular politicians, but those who are trying to claim a mass advance in Victoria are simply wrong. But it's still good. The third thing that's good is I've sensed a change. 2 weeks ago, I was the star, and I do invite you to Google this, my name, and a current affair. A current affair is the most conservative, non-drug law reform, you know, sort of the equivalent of Rupert Murdoch's Sky News, a current affair half-an-hour program. They did an interview with me and a person who was suffering with medicinal cannabis and loss of license, and it was totally sympathetic, and it was a full 9 minutes, 6 of which were me spewing my stuff. So apart from wanting to look at me longer, you can go and have a look at that. And then something even weirder happened, which was I got a call from 2GB to ask me to do an interview on drug driving, which I did on Wednesday this week. Now, this is unheard of. That's like Sky News interviewing Bob Brown. It's so extraordinary that we seem to now have opened the door to something else, and I can't help thinking it's just a wee bit orchestrated. I hope I'm right, and that the New South Wales government is softening up for change. You know, combined with that is the fact that in Western Australia, 2 representatives. In Victoria, 2 representatives. In New South Wales, Jeremy Buckingham, all for legalised cannabis. You know, politicians are starting to realise, and you know, Jeremy's, for example, in his maiden speech, the 2 main issues are possession of prohibited drugs and drug driving, and everyone's on the same page with this. So, I think 2GB in a current affair, who knows? That must be a start to change, surely. I think the other thing is, apart from the political impetus, is people like Janelle Saffin, for example, who has been a long-term friend of legislative change in this area, is now in Cabinet in New South Wales. She's the Minister for Reconstruction and the North Coast and a few other bits and pieces. And, you know, we know she has made it clear her views on these drug driving laws. And I think that augurs well for change also. Before I forget, there is something else about prescription cannabis that's important to realise. How many people here are on prescription cannabis? So please correct me if I'm wrong, but I think what the prescriptions usually say is take after meals at night. Do they say take in the evenings? When are you being asked to take?
Use as directed by your doctor.
Right. So
mine says, because I've got a high dose of sativa and indica, my morning says take in the morning and then take of an evening.
Right. The bottom line is this, that if you take within 24 hours of a drug test, that is peak period in that first 24 hours. The reason I'm mentioning that is because this is not like so many other drugs. This is daily, usually daily use, so you are at risk at all times. Okay, so that is a picture of how we got here. It's a picture of who wins. It's a picture of where we are now, and it's a picture of my hopes and prayers for what's going to happen in the future. So I was really hoping we could then open it up to some sort of discussion, question and answer session about drug driving and where we go from here. And I'm happy to answer any questions as best I can, and let's share information. Yeah.
Oh, Ray, got a question?
I'll start it off. The question for me, thank you. I just, yeah, as I said, I so admire you and the good work you've done, and the magnificent effort into a position now where you can be creative and positive instead of being bombarded with the cruelty of the system. Anyway, my question is, I had a designated driver, my partner, and on the way in I started the question as you would have, and in fact I know you have an answer. They pick upon us while we're driving. I'm stoned now and I love it, you know. But why don't they do that on the street? Why is it pertaining to just driving? Aren't they allowed to check? I mean, I've done something illegal now and I can test it, but why don't they test?
It's a great question. And of course, the police never... there's two reasons for this. One is a legal reason and one is a factual reason. And that is it's only recently, relatively recently, that other than blood tests, they have, or urine tests, which are but A, invasive, and B, require some sort of privacy. It's been harder technologically to test for THC than it is now with the lick sticks. So presumably they could. There's a very practical issue too, and that is with 1.3 million scripts, there's a shitload more people walking around with cannabis in their system who are legal. You know, I was at the last Splendor, I spoke at the last Splendor, and I was noticing at the gate there, the sniffer dogs would go off a bit, and then people would, before they would even be searched, they'd say, yeah, I've got cannabis on me, but here's my script. And what are the police meant to do then? They just sort of look around and go, holy shit, we better let them go. So imagine if they tested the streets of Nimbin, well, geez, but a lot of people would have scripts, and what a waste of time that would be. So they're not, where's their reasonable cause, and this is the legal reason, to test? Generally speaking, if you want to, for example, let's say someone is weaving all over the road, they're not using cannabis, you suspect they're under the influence of a prescription drug, then only then do you have the right to test them, once that reasonable doubt has occurred. But this is the thing with the random testing, it is theoretically, and I'll come back to that, random. I mean, seriously, without wanting to swear too much, how fucking random is it to have the buses here at MardiGrass? I mean, that's about as random as, you know, it's just such shit. And really, it's a great weekend to be into domestic violence or picking up children online, because all the police are here policing something that causes no harm to our community. So, but the other reason is because driving has always perceived to be different. Road safety is such an important issue that rights have been ameliorated for a long time with drink driving, the start. And before that even, you know, walking along lines in the 1950s. So, but road safety has always been an area where people's rights have been eroded because road safety is perceived as more important. Whereas walking along the street under the influence of a drug has never excited the same rights of police to test. Having said that, I remember many years ago they brought sniffer dogs out to Nimbin, and there was a bell. Does anyone else remember this? The cowbell would dong outside the museum, and lovely little volunteers would go and throw bong water out all over the streets. And if you've ever seen a dog chasing its tail, that's what was happening to them. They were just so excited that they're running around like this. So yeah, I mean, they have tried that. And also, I wish Rusty was here. I hear he's not that well, but Rusty's trick was when the sniffer dogs were there, he would just instantly take all his clothes off and continue walking down the street like, search me. They ran a mile, they just couldn't cope with anything. One last story related to that is one time when I was a drug lawyer here in Nimbin, used to work out of the fruit and veggie store, Sam's Fruit and Veggie Store, those of you who've been around for long enough. Anyway, I got paid for doing a drug matter, and the guy gives me a wad of cash in a plastic bag. And I think, that's great, so I put it in my pocket, and I had to get a plane to Sydney. So I get off the plane at the other end, and this beagle comes and stands in front of me and goes mental, and I'm thinking, I don't have any drugs on me. Anyway, they started searching me, which was lovely. I like to be patted down. And they opened the plastic bag, and it reeked like the pong of the cannabis straight out of the money. And you can imagine why. It had like been stored with the drugs sort of thing. Anyway, so yes, I'm used to drug law enforcement, but yeah, they let me keep the money, which was nice of them. And yeah, I went on my way. Any other questions? Yes.
I got caught last MardiGrass, and about 4 weeks ago I went to court, and I was humming and hawing what to do for my defence, and I ended up going for a guilty with explanation. And I said I'm a cancer survivor, I'm a hemp farmer, and I need my car and my driver's license, and he let me go off. But it was a nervous time, and I think we're being discriminated severely, and I think it's time we do something about it. And yeah,
absolutely. And you know, the discrimination aspect is very real. You know, medicinal cannabis users are being discriminated against. I mean, imagine this. Imagine that you can be prescribed opioids. You can be prescribed anti-anxiety drugs. Do not hug that man. He's evil, completely evil. Imagine that you can be prescribed any of those drugs, and yet you're not subject to detectable levels. So I think the best example is opioids, really. That of course so many people use as painkillers. As long as you're using as prescribed, then presumably you're not under the influence in the sense, but we all do accept that your driving will be slightly adversely affected. You know, once or twice when I hate flying, so I've taken a Valium, and I would not drive the next day. You know, like I'm like a sleeping mess. So we all know these drugs, but I would not be committing an offence in terms of detectable levels, whereas with THC you are. So you are certainly being discriminated against. And every time a doctor writes a prescription, let's keep in mind what that word really means. Prescription. They are prescribing this drug. They are saying you should take this drug. This is, in my medical opinion, the best drug for your condition. And yet, you then can't drive. And it gets worse. If any of you insured with Amy, if you're insured with Amy, there is a clause in your insurance company, in your insurance contract, that says if you have the presence of any illicit drug, and then they list them, including THC, then you are not covered for your insurance at all. NRMA doesn't have that, Amy does. So there's a guy in Sydney who is sitting at an intersection and he gets T-boned. And he's injured and he gets taken to hospital, and the car that T-bones him is an uninsured lout from somewhere or other, probably Nimbin, and he's in hospital, he gets drug tested, and it comes back THC positive. Why? Because he's using medicinal cannabis. Because the lout doesn't have insurance, he puts in a claim to his own insurance to Amy, and Amy says, sorry, you're not covered. You're not covered for the damage to your motor vehicle because you had THC, an illicit drug, in your system. And he says, that's crap. I've got a prescription. And they go, read your policy, mate. Oh. So, it's not just discrimination in terms of drug testing, it's also discrimination in terms of your liability for other vehicles, collisions, or your own, if you're the victim of that, in terms of getting insurance. Yes?
Especially like, build on that, I get prescribed stimulants, ADHD, and I'm told I should take them to drive, and you know, and don't test for them.
Yes.
Don't care at all.
It's so true. Now, so that's a really good point. But a word of warning with that. Imagine if you were involved in a fatal accident. I don't mean you were killed, but you were involved in that sort of, or one where there's what's greatest a serious level of harm, then you may still be forced to give a blood test, and it may end up that that substance is tested for. But then that's not a crime to have it in your system. They would have to show a connection between that, a causative connection between that and the death or collision, for there to be any liability, and the chances of that are zero. So in effect, you are people, if you, instead of taking that stimulant for ADHD, if you found cannabis worked better, well, you'd be stuffed.
I have a cannabis prescription for that as well.
Right. Yes. They do both slow you down.
Oh, well, the ADHD trope, which is true for me, is tend towards speeding, right?
Yes.
Yeah. ADHD drugs or cannabis both tend to slow you down.
Well, if you saw Michael White's speech earlier, I mean, he makes that point. And, you know, there is a difference between being under the influence of a drug and being adversely affected by it in terms of reflexes and all the rest of it. And, you know, there's plenty of studies that show, I mean, this is a whole other topic, that those people who are using cannabis drive more slowly and more carefully. Once it took me 4 hours to get from the Shannon to Lismore. Absolutely. Absolutely. And of course, we don't have a negative detection test for alcohol. And this is a really interesting thing, because if we did, then imagine how that would, you know, I mean, every Australian get-together these days is an excuse to drink. But the truth is, if we had detectable levels for THC, for alcohol, then, and an even playing field, then society would be changed. It would never happen. It won't happen. Yeah.
Hi, so out of all the tests that are conducted on New South Wales roads, do you know the numbers, how many come back positive and then how many lead to convictions, as well as possibly the monetary cost to the state? Yeah.
Yes, I do. So in New South Wales, about 13% of all tests test positive. Of that 13%, 3% are other drugs, 10% is THC. Of those people, do we know how many are medicinal cannabis users? Well, the answer is a lot, but we don't know the proportion. But we do know how many are prescription cannabis users, and it's about 60%, so about 6 out of 10 of those. So you're really looking at a significant number of people who are driving in accordance with their prescription, who are losing their licenses, which of course is terribly sad. Interestingly, just going back to something that was said earlier by, I think, Ray, Dr. Ray, as I call him, a pioneer, I should say, of alternate herbal remedies, medicines, and the like. I mean, really, and remember when you got busted?
Yes.
I'll never forget that. What was it? It was like, seriously, Ray was running a herbal company that wasn't selling cannabis or any illicit drug, but you got raided by, like 15 or 20 police, and then all the people from the Therapeutic Goods Administration. Yeah, they don't like competition, that's for sure. In any event, I've completely lost my train of thought. I got diverted by Ray. The cost of it is just astronomical. And it's not just a cost in money. The New South Wales Police get paid for every test they do. They get paid by the Road Safety Authority. That means the police budget is increased and the road safety budget is decreased by several tens of millions of dollars a year. That means that what could be useful for things like road safety that really works, things like black spots, things like speeding detection, things like SMS, detection, are all put to one side. So there's a cost, but also there's the police time. Now, when you get the lick stick test, it's not immediate. You don't get the test and then you drive off. Every test takes time. And of course, if it's positive, it takes a lot longer. But every test takes 5, 10, 15 minutes. 280,000 tests in New South Wales times 15 minutes. That is a lot of policing time that could maybe be looking at something like I don't know, child sexual abuse, domestic violence, you know, like we're talking about much more serious crimes than this unproven technology that does nothing to increase road safety.
That seems logical. Why do politics, what other interference?
Happening with politicians that they can't see. Plus, there's a commercial value that surely they must see.
Well, it's a really good question. Let's look at who the major donors are in New South Wales politics. The major donors are the alcohol industry. Who has a lot to lose if people start using more cannabis? The alcohol industry does not like competition for altering your state of consciousness. Second highest is pharmaceutical companies, and we know why they want to keep cannabis under the counter, because the large pharmaceutical companies have competition from a hell of a lot of small, caring, like Dr. Uggs. Thank you, Paul. So we know why that is. So yes, there's that. But also, don't underestimate the incredible power of the Murdoch press. Every single drug law reform has been opposed by, it used to be the Daily Telegraph, the Courier Mail, now it's Sky News, and all of the acolytes online of the Murdoch press. You can do a study of the states of the United States and look at the amount of influence of the Murdoch press and compare that to drug law reform, and you get a perfect match. They are obsessed with it. And many years ago, for the Australian Union of Students, there's only a couple of children here, he's not taking any notice, I would start my talks on drug law reform by telling this joke. Why don't fundamentalist Christians like fucking standing up? The answer is because it leads to dancing. And that's why we don't have drug law reform, because it leads to dancing. There is this moral obsession with increasing the use of cannabis. We've seen it in the ads in the 1950s. We've seen it, and this is a hangover. I mean, after all, when they did make drug driving laws in New South Wales throughout Australia, cannabis was not available by prescription. It is now. Things have changed, but it takes a long time for the government to catch up, and there's a moral panic to the thought of more people using cannabis. Of course, we all know what happens if cannabis is legalised, and that is there is more use, but there is a lot more responsible use and a lot less irresponsible use.
Isn't it powerful for governments to see that though?
You would think so. I joined, as soon as I left the bench, I joined and was the lead of, and still am, of Drive Change, and I thought, which is determined to increase the rights of medicinal cannabis users, largely industry funded. In other words, the cannabis industry funds Drive Change, not that we get paid for it or anything, but to seek to increase the rights of medicinal cannabis users, particularly prescribed users. I thought it would be a 6-month campaign at the most, because it's a no-brainer to allow people who are on prescriptions to drive, provided those conditions are met. But alas, we've got nowhere fast.
Actually, we were saying before about if it was legalised, just look at countries like Holland, where it's been legal for, hey, I was there in Amsterdam in 1985, and it's not a country of potheads.
No, I went to Holland in 1982, and all I can really recollect of that trip is a particular crack in the pavement. I don't know what that says about me, but the best example is Portugal, where they've legalised possession of drugs, and they've seen a decrease in overdose, decrease in problematic drug use, and of course a massive injection of police time, court time, energy, all the rest of it into crimes that really matter. Yeah.
So we've got 5 more minutes. Is there any last minute questions? Put your hand up. No. Okay.
I just spoke to a friend in Guam.
All right.
And it's illegal there because it's American.
Hang on.
So they have a legal cannabis sector.
Yeah, I just heard from a friend in Guam that people were getting caught at work and getting losing their jobs for using cannabis when it's legal. So there was a bit of an outcry, and the government within, I think, in Guam, within about 4 months, changed the legislation so that it couldn't be used at work to discriminate.
Indeed,
So
they did.
It was just this year, I think.
You'll be pleased to know that they exempted airline pilots. They're still not allowed to test positive. And I'm thinking, well, maybe that's okay. Different definitions of high. But it is really interesting to look at the United States, there is nowhere in the United States that has lick-stick random drug testing like we do. Just nowhere. I mean, and this is the leader of prohibition. Of course, there's now 40 states out of 51, leaving Canada aside for now, that is actually where medicinal cannabis is legal and where recreational cannabis in 38 states. I mean, here we are in Australia with zero recreational use being legalised. We're so behind the times. And police discretion is against us. You know, in the United Kingdom, possession of cannabis is illegal. And there is 1/10 the number of cases in the whole of the United Kingdom for possession of cannabis than there is in New South Wales alone. In other words, the police aren't interested, and why would they be? They got better things to do with their time and energy. But here in Australia, convict land bill, they are obsessed with busting everybody, even I mean, someone was talking about the internal searches of children at festivals at music festivals this morning. Now there's a court action and claim, etc. But on what planet is it okay to internally search children for drugs as they're entering a festival? Beggars belief.
And on that note, we might call it finish up. Thank you so much, David, for coming and sharing such a wealth of knowledge. And Northern Leaders is very lucky to have you as Dean of Law, because hopefully you'll be influencing the next batch of lawyers, etc.
Well, hopefully everyone here is going to enrol to become lawyers. The world would be a better place. Yeah. Enrol now. It's never too late.
The more the merrier. Is Emily in the building? Please identify. Thank you. Emily's up the back. So we'll just have